Hello and welcome to today's Tippcast with myself, Shane Stapleton, joined as ever by Nina Guardian, Head of Sport. That man there, Shane Brophy. Shane, how are things with you?
I know, Shane, all good.
Yeah, look, so we're going to come and talk about Ballygunner against Kilruane pretty soon, but I think one of the first things to touch on is something that's after breaking in the last, I suppose, day or so, this situation with Ballybay in Monaghan, whose joint club manager, Jerome Johnson, has stepped down because they're up against his native Kilcoo and his three sons in the next round. And then you also have in the Munster Club Hurling Championship coming up the weekend after next, the same coach has been preparing Ballyea and St. Finbarrs, so 2 county titles to his name already this year, Adrian O'Brien, and he's standing down as well. What do you make of this situation? Are you on the camp whereby if you buy in with a team and sign up with them for the year, you're with them no matter what? Now, I know that Jerome Johnson had kind of flagged this beforehand, so he can always say, look, I told you. But surely once you're in, you're in.
Yeah, it's an odd one. I think the hurling one is slightly easier. I don't think what's his name?
Adrian O'Brien.
I don't think he's not a member of each club. He's an outsider of both. So
Kilmallock.
Yeah, so like he can easily say, I'm recusing myself from both sides, so I can't be accused of bias, which is, I think it's acceptable enough. Like there's like, if he chooses one club or the other, like how does that look? So like I think that's different. The Jerome Johnson one is, yeah, it's an interesting one for me because look, if you signed up for a club, even if you come back playing against your own, I think you should see it out really, like, because I assume he's been brought in, he's been remunerated to do the job. So I think there's like when he took the job, I suppose there was always a risk particularly if Ballybay were probably outsiders in Monaghan to win, that the chance was there, small chance, and you sort of got to weigh that up. Like, so I do think the one in Ulster is a bit different, and maybe he should have stuck it out. Like, and like he might like to see his own club and his own three sons lose, but God, that club has achieved an awful lot. Like, is him potentially beating them, and like it does. I think they've looked so far that Kilcoo have staying close to the wind a lot of times in the Down Championship this year. They're probably, are they going to successfully defend that All Ireland? I'd say it's unlikely at the moment, because I think the way they're going, somebody's going to take them out sooner rather than later. Like, so, but I suppose it just show that your club means number one, and even if it comes to all, he wasn't prepared to see his club lose at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think Kilcoo actually, now that you mention it, they've had to go to penalties or extra time at least 3 times in the knockout stages of the championship. So that kind of gives you a fair indication of how close they're sailing to the win. But Conleth Gilligan will be hoping to kick on with them. I just even wonder, though, if they do win Ballybay, that is, does Jerome Johnson Sr. come back in? So that's one thing which obviously we can't answer. I'm sure he probably will, but does it leave a lasting legacy? And then number two, if he was to stay around for this weekend, his sons are stylish footballers. Especially when you're talking about Ulster football, you'd nearly be instructing your players to go out and get stuck into them. And, sometimes in Ulster, they're still close to the wind. So imagine he's sending lads out like attack dogs on his own sons.
Yeah, that's it. And actually, would he tell the truth maybe about the weakness of his own sons? Like, every player has perceived weakness. Like, so, yeah, I suppose it'll be an interesting to see how it all transpires. I presume he'll be at the match. Will he be sitting in amongst the Kilcoo fans? He probably will. Like, so or will he just find a quiet section of the ground, maybe on his own, where I suppose he can he be seen to celebrate a Kilcoo score against the team he's coaching? Like, it's a fascinating one. Maybe he mightn't even go to the game at all. Like, it'd be interesting to see how it works out for him.
Yeah, definitely. In a way, you'd probably be the smartest things to stay away from it. I suppose now we'll talk about Kilruane McDonagh's, and they've had a brilliant season, but of course it came to an end last weekend. Ballygunner, pretty relentless team, as we've kind of known for some time, but just the way that they picked apart the Magpies was pretty tough at times, and there was 15 or 20 minutes to go, and you knew that the game was done. Plenty of
So your link is kind of you're freezing on me there, Shane.
Sorry, can you hear me okay now?
You can hear you now, yeah.
Yeah. So the way Ballygunner won 419 to 14 points, Kevin Mahoney with 2-2, Patrick Fitzgerald with 1-4. And how would you reflect on Kilruane, the challenge they had, and how they dealt with it last weekend?
Sure. Look, it probably went along expected lines. Like we probably knew that the week's turnaround, they had, I think, 2 training sessions, 1 pitch session, where most of the starting 15 were on the sidelines. So look, they had very little recovery time, and then you saw at the start, like Mark O'Neill had a big strapping on his leg. Aaron Morgan had a glove on. We found out, and he was gone after about 12 minutes with a broken finger. It looked a bad injury. It looks like one that could keep him out for a while. Then Niall O'Mara goes off in the second half. So look, and they just don't have the depth, the playing depth to replace those. You knew they were running on empty, and at any mistake they made was going to be ruthlessly punished by Ballygunner. And we probably saw that with the goal in the just before half time was a turnover at the wrong end of the field, and Ballygunner turned it into a score. But look, Kilruane needed everything to run for them. They needed all the poor wides in the first half with the wind to go over the bar. And like I thought, they were playing okay without being great, but you just knew that Ballygunner would have enough class and that opportunities would open up, and they'd pick them apart, and that's what they did.
Yeah. Do you think if that Willie Cleary goal chance had to go in during the first half, I know he was hooked well, there probably was 1 or 2 other times where Kilruane were threatening to run through, but like Ballygunner had so many numbers there every time that Kilruane did try and work the ball through. It was very difficult, and I don't think they probably would have needed 3 or 4 goals, really, wouldn't they?
Oh yeah, I think I said it last week. I think for Kilruane to win, they needed to be about 5-10 to 11 or 5-10 to 120 or something like that. So, I suppose there was a lot of naivety in the way Kilruane sort of went about. Kilruane did what they did all year. It was very direct. It was try and win your own ball, maybe get a bit of luck with the break falling down to somebody. And look, it just wasn't gonna work out like that. Because like the way Ballygunner set up, they'll flood the breakdown zone if you're going to play a direct style of hurling. And look, they ate it up. And look, they weren't probably at the sharpest by their own high standards, but it was sufficient on the day. Look, I just got the sense that Kilruane went down, was nearly hoping for the best in a lot of ways, and look, it just didn't work out. And look, in another scenario this year, the Tipperary County Final takes place on its original date of October the 9th, and the winner, if it was Kilruane back then, have 4 weeks to recover, refresh, maybe set up a game plan to take on Ballygunner. In this case, they had only 7 days. They had injuries. They just and the 1 pitch session to try and maybe change a game plan that you've practically played the same way the whole year, no matter who you've come up against. You might have tweaked maybe things in terms of man markers and things like that, but maybe go from a possession base, or maybe to go with more sharp hook outs than raking long ones that Paudie Williams did most of the year. So it really was a very unlikely scenario that they were going to win that game last Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, people are a little bit critical about the route one that Kilruane went with, but they had a lot of chances early on in the game and didn't take them. I think it was wasn't it 5 wides to 0, something like that, early on in the game. And some of them should have gone over the bar, which would suggest that in some ways it was working. Now, you know me, I'm not a full advocate of long ball, but at times there's no harm in getting the ball up there in the mixer. So we've got a comment in here. I'm just going to put it up on screen from Porter saying, does the Ballygunner defeat reflect the poor standard of club hurling in Tipperary? Well, if I can put it like this, if you take Ballygunner out of the equation, how many of those clubs down in Waterford would do that to Kilruane? I would say none. I mean, maybe the odd day a team can get hammered, but I would say none. Ballygunner, in club hurling terms, are a bit of a superpower. If you take Ballyhale out of the Kilkenny Championship, what other superpowers are there? There's a lot of other decent clubs. But and Ballyhale could potentially do that to Kilruane and maybe some other Tipperary club teams. They do it to an awful lot of sides. But there's no superpowers beyond that. Outside of St. Thomas's, is there anyone else in Galway that should be that afraid of? Plus, St. Thomas's have been beaten by a Tipperary club in recent times. And then go to any other club in the country and just, is there any other county championship where you'd bring out 3 or 4 teams that would all hammer Tipperary teams? No, it's just there's a couple of super clubs around the country. And, I'm not blaming them for being super clubs. They're absolutely brilliant. And some of them have great numbers, some of them don't. But it's just there's a couple of teams that will fillet you. But it doesn't mean that your entire championship is terrible, because with the 95% of the other teams, you might match up really well.
No, I don't think. Look, I think each championship has to be judged in its own. What's going on in each country. Look at Ballygunner, for example. This is their 9th. Okay, take out 2020 where there's no more. This is their 8th successive run in Munster. Like that's a level of experience and know-how of what it takes maybe to refocus after a county championship. And I think it's actually something I wrote about in the paper this week, that, look, no disrespect to all the other teams in Waterford, Ballygunner probably know at the start of the year, bar they self-combust, they're going to win the Waterford Championship. So they're probably hoping we'll get through July, August, September, refresh, we'll come back and refocus for November and December, which is their target. And they have all that built up. Come to Tipperary then. We've had 6 different county champions in the last 6 years. Maybe take out the first one in Thurles Sarsfields, who built up a level of know-how for Munster, and maybe Lockmore had it as well from playing hurling and football. They knew what they were coming into. Borrisley didn't know what they were coming into. Clonmel certainly didn't, because they were so off the pace against the Piershig when they played in that Munster quarter-final. And then this year, it all depends on what your focus is at the start of the year. Ballygunner's focus at the start of the year, okay, to say we'll win Waterford first, but they know they're dealing in Munster and All-Ireland clubs. Ballyhale are dealing in Munster and All-Ireland clubs. To a lesser extent in the Piershig are, but maybe last year was a down year for them. They had injuries. The 2 Casey brothers are back. So I think it all depends on what's going on in your county. I don't think the Tip Club Championship is that bad. I just think it's so open at the moment that you're not getting a dominant team like Tumivara were for maybe a decade and a half, like Thurles Sarsfields were for maybe a 10-year period. That, okay, if they win, that they're going to be competitive. They know they're going to give it a right good go. And I was actually at something I researched. I just looked through the last, just from my column this week. Don't underestimate the importance of the draw in the Provincial Cup Championship. Take out the last 9 years of the Munster club, the Tipperary champions have had 2 home games first up outside of the county championship. Thurles Sarsfields in 16 and Borrisley in 19. What happened? Both those teams won. The other 7 times Tipperary clubs have had to start away from home. I'm a believer in luck of the draw sometimes, and if you're starting away from home more often than you're not, and I think home draws in provincial club championships are absolutely massive. If you're starting away from home more often than you're not, there's a fair chance you're going to be beaten.
Yeah, and like with Cool as well, we had home draws a couple of times. We had an away one once as well, but that was getting the right team as well. So you got a team that was very beatable away from home. But
there's a few times where Thurles started away in Ennis against Ballyea, they started away in Waterford against Ballygunner. Clonmel Rossmore started away in Limerick against the Piershig. Kilruane started, and Lockmore the last 2 years started away in Waterford against Ballygunner. So I don't know how the Munster Council are working. It does look like there's a bit of luck on how these draws, but certainly it's not falling on Tipperary teams. I'm not saying playing the poor amount. I just think I'd love to see it evened up somewhere, that there's a greater chance of Tipperary teams, champions in senior hurling, getting a fair crack at the whip of potentially having a home game. I for one don't believe that if that match was played in Thurles, that the result would have been any different. You're putting Ballygunner on the best hurling surface in the country. The result is probably the same. I just do think saying that it's a poor reflection on the Tip Club Championship, I don't know. I don't think it stacks up. I do. Look, I think it's more the fact that as you mentioned, there are some superpower clubs in terms of Ballygunner and the Pierceak, St. Thomas's, Ballyhale. Probably Knockneal will probably be the winners in Ulster. So you're potentially looking at 4 of the 5 teams that have been dominating provincial club hurling over the last 5 or 6 years will probably make up the last 4 in the All-Ireland Club semi-finals.
Yeah, absolutely. And what about this talk that Tipperary teams aren't as tactically evolved as other counties? That there's a bit more traditional element to how teams across the board in Tip play. Would you go along with that? No,
I think I do. I buy into that. All right. I think there's a reticence to a lot of people in Tipperary to where hurling is going, even if it means maybe our own clubs suffer small. But I think like the Thurles Arseals in Killadangan probably have bought into it. I would have said Borrisley were very traditional. I would have said Kilruane have been very traditional. But look, it won Borrisley and Kilruane county championships. It won them Borrisley and Munster clubs. So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. I do think maybe there's going to be a gradual evolution, but I think there's a lot of catch up in terms of what the likes in the Pierceak and Ballygunner have been doing over the last 5 or 6 years. And that, look, it helps from the fact that they have been able to have long runs outside of their provincial championships. It helps that for a few years in the Pierceak we're probably preparing themselves to play Coola most of the time. And what were Coola? Coola were, I know you were a very tactically savvy team who protected the ball, I would say, at all costs and played to the strength out of, I wouldn't say it was Con O'Callaghan or nothing, but it played to how do we get the ball into Con's hands more often than not when he was at his prime.
Yeah, and of course we're all really posh as well. That really helped. Paul Tierney said the year that was Kilruane winning Tip meant to be Kildangan didn't show up, and Lockmore would have given Ballygunner a harder game. Yeah, look, I mean, if they had 2 weeks,
Kildangan would probably be tactically savvy than Kilruane would have been, and maybe would have given Ballygunner a better game, would have beaten him. I'm not so sure. I think you need to be at you need to be at the peak, your fitness peak, at fresh. You need to, like, as far as I could see, Ballygunner had nobody missing last weekend or nobody carrying an injury. And look, that's the way Waterford have designed their championship. I personally, I don't agree with the way Waterford, Wexford, Carlow play their championships with hurling first. But look, if it suits what they want to do down there, good luck to them. I know I think there might be a proposal in Tip coming from the football board that maybe Tip would go the same route, but I would be surprised if it would get an awful lot of support.
Yeah, okay. So let's bring out the tactics board here, because this is how I saw it a lot of the time. In black, obviously, Ballygunner, and white, Kilruane. That when somebody won the ball, let's say Cian Darcy got it or whatever, he would just be absolutely surrounded. And Ballygunner are very good at doing this, of just sliding the whole team across so that the space is at the far side. And if, Cian Darcy would have to play the ball back to maybe someone like Mark O'Neill and then just play it across and try and find someone eventually to score. But the numbers that Ballygunner got back were incredible. And I also thought the way the likes of Mikey Mahoney, maybe Peter Hogan, even Kevin Mahoney and so on, they'd be available on the wing. So you're always stretching Kilruane. I thought it's so impressive the way they do it. And they're very disciplined in the tackle. And once the ball was eventually turned over, they're just so lightning fast at getting it up to the other end. And of course, you have Patrick Fitzgerald, who's like a young Desi Hutchinson up there. And you've Pádraig Mahoney, of course, popping over points, and Kevin Mahoney. They just have so many different options for getting scores. It's so difficult to see how Kilruane can win that game. And they're getting dragged up the field as well. You're going long puck outs. Ballygunner are sitting everybody back. You're going to get sucked up the field, which is going to leave your backline exposed. And I know that is kind of the gamble you take, but they do tend to punish you. And look, it was unfortunate that the goal came right before half-time, because it probably did kill off the game and maybe suck a little bit of belief out of the team before the second half started.
Yeah, no, it did. But I think that there was probably a sense that, look, Kilruane needed to be on par, if not a point or two ahead coming into Place the Breeze. Maybe do a lot of what Borrisley did 3 years ago, keep it tight as long as possible, maybe start getting Ballygunner into, I wouldn't say panic, but maybe get him a little on edge. But like once that goal went in and then there was start of the second half, it was game over. And I can look at it wouldn't be my cup of tea in terms of the style of hurling Ballygunner played. There's an awful lot of we say football strategy in it, flood the defensive area, force turnovers, counter attack at pace the other way. And look, when you have Desi Hutchinson and Patrick Fitzgerald, Kevin Mahoney at the top end of the field, they don't need a huge number of scorers. Maybe they know that those guys can finish. And look, I felt in some ways it was such an eye-opening game for Jack James Cleary, and we give him an awful lot of credit for the way he man-marked Sean Hayes in the 2 county finals. But Sean Hayes, and then you're moving up to Desi Hutchinson, and like the first 3 balls Desi Hutchinson got bang, bang, bang over the bar. I know there was a couple of people being critical of James Cleary to say, why are you standing off Desi? Why aren't you going toe for toe to him? And I was thinking, lads, you're picking your poison here. If James Cleary goes touch tight and Desi Hutchinson, Desi probably still wins the 3 balls. He turns on a sixpence and he gives James Cleary the slip, and he's probably in for 3 goals. So in that element, what do you do? Like, are you better off just concede the point rather than risk the goal? Like, it's, and maybe the same with Aaron Morgan and Patrick Fitzgerald.
Well, put it like this: Desi Hutchinson scored 5 or 6 from play against Sean Finn earlier in the year, and you're asking a guy who's not surrounded by an intercounty defence to somehow gamble and get out in front of this guy who's a former professional soccer player, is probably one of the fastest guys in the game. It just wouldn't be realistic. I mean, one thing I'd say is Ballygunner knew when to foul as well. Keano Kelly running through in the second half, he got dragged to the ground. I think once or twice, maybe Drom Cahill got dragged down.
That's something that is, I know,
who could have been avoided to do clinical fouls.
Yeah, like it's coming in. We saw it a good few times in the county championship, and like, I know I can hear people saying that we can't bring in football reels into hurling, lads. The way the cynical foul is coming into hurling, lads, it's not football that'll be changing hurling rules. It'll be hurling's bad habits that'll be changing hurling rules, because like we saw with Willie Connors in the Drom county final, a couple of like I think there's too many of these pull downs coming, like, and I wouldn't be surprised if that the old black card comes into hurling sooner rather than later. And it won't be because of football, it's because of hurling.
Yeah, like I can remember James Quigley doing a bit of a rugby tackle in one of the finals, and like you said as well, Willie Connors was pulled back. So it was happening on both sides, so it's not to pick out one.
No, but it's becoming more common, as I think the point I'm making.
Fantastic win there, 421 to 15 points. You can't ignore the fact that Ballysaggart didn't have Kieran Bennett because he's away in Australia, and Shane Bennett had to go off injured early, so that really did take something out of them. But 421 is fair shooting.
It is, yeah, and I suppose the second half when Ross Gray really pulled away, I suppose maybe, I don't know how much preparation Ballysaggart put into it over the last 8 weeks, but the fact that Ross Gray pulled away so severely suggested maybe they had the gas on Ballysaggart as well. But look, it was a great win for Ross Gray. Probably coming in under a small bit of pressure, like there was a game they were expected to win. They were the first Tipperary Oreen Cup champions, Premier Intermediate, to be put into that competition. So you were sort of thinking, okay, they've got to back that up. They've at least got to win this round and get through to the next round up against Inishkara of Cork. And I suppose that'll be the acid test of how competitive Ross Gray will be, because
here
we always know that can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you okay.
That's going to be the acid test. Look, over the years, the Cork champions in the intermediate grade have tended to be very, very competitive in terms of winning provincials and going on and winning Club All Ireland. So even though they're not the second tier champions in Cork, they're the third tier champions. Like it'll be the 25th team in Cork against the 17 team in Tip. And for the amount of Cork clubs have, I think it's about 250 clubs to 72 in Tip. You're probably looking at fairly even in terms of numbers. So I think if Ross Gray can win on Saturday week, I think it's a home game against Inning Thurles. Like, they have a great chance of maybe winning Munster, maybe progressing, getting to Croke Park, which is something they've been targeting.
Yeah, and like Ross Gray have plenty of good scorers up there. Conor Sheedy, Luke Cashin, and so on and so forth.
Like, yeah, they have a very, very good start in 15. And they're fit, like they're missing nobody at the moment, like, so.
And do you get this more in playing in recent times, that they're playing like a team who knows that they should probably be operating at a higher level in Tipperary, which of course they will next year?
Yeah, definitely. And look, they I suppose they want to keep this going, and plus their club won the first ever All Ireland senior club. Like, they might think, okay, this is only intermediate. There's no comparison. But like, you want to take more momentum into next year too, and test yourselves against the best outside your own county. Look, they've proven themselves to be the best in Tip. They would think they'll be okay in senior next year, or maybe I think that they'll be very, very competitive. So I think from their point of view, they'll be thinking this is a great chance. Okay, we'll be going up senior. Are we going to win a senior championship next year or in the next couple of years? Probably unlikely. So what opportunity have we now to maybe make history? Maybe win a Munster club, maybe get to Crow Park. I'm sure that'll be their focus over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah. So now that the club season, and obviously Ross Gray are still going, but that the club season in general terms has come to a close, do you see many new faces being called up by Liam Cahill? Are you hearing much? There's probably plenty of guys there, like Brian O'Mara will surely be back. I think Kieran Connolly's not too far away from returning to full training if he hasn't already. Then have any guys really impressed you and like, I even would say we got to look at size profile here. Somebody like Jack Ryan, who was very good for Clonmel Rossmore, what would he be like? I don't think he played too much underage for Tipperary. Just got players like that. Will Gerard O'Connor make another step up next year?
Yeah, I suppose the few things I'm hearing is that there's definitely going to be an emphasis on youth, I think, in Liam Cahill's squad. Probably the sign there's going to be a rebuild. There might be a few hard days ahead, but look, we did see over the last 4 or 5 years that the one thing in Tip, there's no shortage of talent. What we're short on now is experience. There's going to be growing pains. We've got to get guys up to the level in terms of S&C. Have you frozen on me again there, Shane? You have?
I did for a minute.
Yeah. So look, it's going to be about getting maybe a group of guys in, getting them all on the same page, getting them on programs. I think a lot of them have already started their programs. So yeah, go through names. Look, you have to think from what we've seen so far. You think Aaron Morgan will be one. I suppose that broken hand is not going to do him any good, but we know. And just looking at his shape, he's a guy that is going to have to fill out a bit more. But look, guys at that age, like, everybody is at a certain level. I'm sure he'll be one. I think Podge Campion would have seen with Drom and Inch this year. Definitely is another. He didn't have a great county semi-final, but look, everybody can't be great every day. So I think he's another John Campion for last. He was probably the star of that under-20 group, so he'd be another. I think Sean Ryan is definitely worth to go. Sean Ryan and Aaron and Andrew Ormond too, probably in terms of the way intercounty hurling is going, probably don't have the physique, but like, I don't think we can throw everything on a physique. You need guys that have to be elusive, that maybe maybe the Peter Casey vibe, who maybe will use his footwork to get out of troublesome situations. So, but like, I think the interesting aspect for me will be there's a couple of guys who are still eligible for under 20 next year. Peter McGarry, Jack Leamy. Will their development be fast tracked into the seniors, whereby potentially they won't play under 20, or will the long term view be taken? Maybe those guys are better stay with Brendan Cummins' group. Like, the question I'd ask, and the same with you, is having a Jack Leamy or a Peter McGarry playing a few minutes senior, would they be better off playing a full under 20 campaign, if you know what I mean? I think that's a conversation I'd love to have between Liam Cahill and Brendan Cummins, or maybe what's the thinking there?
Yeah, well, one thing for sure is the rule is ludicrous. It's not helping anybody out. That there should just be allowed management teams to figure it out, and county boards to nearly lay down sort of rules before the season starts out. But I don't know. I'd imagine a full season of under 20 would benefit them slightly more, but be training with the senior team all the time. And if they're excelling massively and you think they're going to be used regularly, then I'd say fair enough. If the county team senior really wants them and is going to be using them, then fair enough. Go ahead and use them. What do you think?
Yeah, I'd be the same, provided you nearly want them guaranteed to be on the first 15 at senior. Like, if they're only going to be a bit part, I would think, like I would say, was Christopher Joyce? He was underage for under 20 last year, was he? Like okay, he proved himself to be senior worthy. But I'm not sure whether Leamy and McGarry are at that stage yet where you can certainly, are they in the Christopher Joyce mold where there's a fair chance he's going to be playing a lot of senior hurling next year? And if it's not, I'd nearly leave him with the 20s. But I don't know if we're at a stage where we have an under 20 that you say he's nailed on to be playing first round of the Munster Senior Championship next year, unless their level of development kicks on seriously.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to Diarmuid O'Sullivan about Kieran Joyce, and he was saying that if you had to go back, they would have put him centre back earlier in the year, I suppose, just to let him get used to it a little bit more.
Yeah.
Then you had the likes of Tiernan Killeen, who didn't line out, and Gavin Lee, who didn't line out for Galway, Oisin Pepper with Wexford, Cathal O'Neill with Limerick. So compromises the integrity of the competition, number one. Plus, none of them, outside of Joyce and Cathal O'Neill to a slightly lesser extent, they didn't play that much. So there's no reason that they couldn't play in both competitions. Paul Tierney says, I hope Paddy Creedon of Sars gets in. Well, he is one lad who has the physical profile you'd imagine to step up straight away. So that's that. We'll talk about Clonmel then. Clonmel this weekend have Nemo Rangers. Obviously, Nemo back on top in Cork.
Frozen on me again there.
Do you see that happening again?
You may repeat that, you keep freezing on me, so you do.
Yeah, I don't know, is it the weather or what it is lately? But it's not too long ago that Nemo suffered at the hands of Clonmel. Could it happen again?
It's an interesting one, but it's like, I suppose Nemo did get their own back, I think, in 2019 in a Munster Club final. Yeah, it's a fascinating one for me. I think player for player, Commercials have a decent chance up against Nemo. It's whether they're preferred to open up and just have a right good go at this. Like, in fairness, Nemo were very, very impressive in the Cork Championship. Like, they were underdogs against St. Finbars, and I think they sort of relished that they sort of were nearly hurt by the fact they were so badly written off. And you look at the quality of player they have. And look, we always know, like, they have a tradition in Munster and All Ireland, so like they'll feel that they have if they get through this game, and it doesn't look like Cairns or Rahleys, the Kerry champions are the strongest Kerry champions that are coming out of the kingdom. Like, so you'd have to think that the winner of this game would really fancy their chances of maybe winning the Munster Club and getting through to an All Ireland semi-final.
Yeah, and I mean, there's so many of the big guns gone out of Connacht already that there's, I'd say, even an All-Ireland title. I mean, you're going to have a huge team coming out of Ulster for sure, and you'll have someone decent coming out of Leinster. But, I think anyone can feel like it's their title at this stage. Kilmacud Crokes, you'd have to make the definite favourites there. And Thurles Sarsfields, they're also out in Munster action this weekend with the big ball. Would we see many familiar faces out there? Anyone that we'd know from the hurling scene?
Yeah, I think you would. I suppose Paddy Creedon would have been, as the aforementioned Paddy Creedon, like, he would have been, I suppose, a dual star underage. So I suppose his father is Peter Creedon, who's the current Tip Ladies football manager, former Tip manager and Laois manager. So look, he's well able to be. He'd be the big name. I suppose in the county final against Sean Tracy's, Michael Cahill came off the bench and he scored the crucial goal in that win. So look. You look at Thurles, the Thurles Sarsfields, they have 5 adult hurling teams. You can't tell me they can't pull a panel of 25 very good footballers out of the guts of 100 hurlers. Like, so, and look, there's a strong soccer tradition in the town as well. You go back to Michael Cahill and Michael Cahill, like, back when he was playing with Tip Minors, like that team he was on with Paudie Maher, they won back-to-back county minor A's with Thurles Sarsfields. And I think Thurles' under 19A team are in the county final against Commercials in a couple of weeks. Look, there's plenty of footballers in Thurles. It's just that hurling is overwhelmingly number one. Fascinating to see now how they go up against a purebred footballing club in Liscannor. the match is in Milltown Melbay, right on the sea, like, so you can't get more traditional football heartland than West Clare. And I think it's a great opportunity to win that. I think they're on the same side of the draw as the Limerick and the Waterford champions, so maybe there potentially could be a Munster championship there. So I would just be fascinated to see how competitive, I suppose, a Thurles Sarsfields would be in provincial football up against, I suppose, against a traditional Clare strong football and stronghold in the Scanner.
Yeah, and then I suppose the Munster senior Camogie Championship, we're going to have Drom and Inch against Scariff Ogonlo. How would you see this one going? I mean, Drom beat De La Salle 3-14 to 18 points. Ogonlo beat Sarsfields of Cork by 16 points to 1-11. Lucy Allen was missing for Sars, so that was a bit of a loss.
Yeah, it's sort of a game of redemption for Drom. Like, they were beaten by Scariff Ogonlo in the Munster final last year, 1 point. So I'd say it's probably the game that the opponent, if Drom were to get back to a Munster final, that they wanted it, then you can't say that Drom won't be fired up for this one. They'll be so ready to go. Look, they were fortunate enough in ways to get past De La Salle last Saturday, but having to go down to Waterford and De La Salle's home ground against the team, I suppose, absolutely flying. Like, they only won the Waterford Championship for the first time recently, so like everything behind them, and they come through in extra time. Like, while they might be a little stiff and sore, like mentally they'll be so tough. And look, I think while Scariff Ogonlo are a terrific side, I can't think that Drom and Inch won't be itching to go the extra mile this year. I think their panel looks an awful lot stronger. Like, they have a couple of players that they didn't have for last year's Munster campaign. I think I mentioned it to Paddy Ryan, their manager, on my radio show last week, that this is in fact Drum's third Munster final in 12 months. To think that they won the delayed 2020 final this time last year, they lost the All-Ireland semi-final to Sarsfields. They practically had to go and defend the Munster Championship within a few weeks, lost that final to Scariff, and now they get the chance 9 months later to maybe try and win back that Munster, that provincial championship. It's an unreal run they're on, and I know they never even properly got to celebrate that 2020 success. So like, they'll be thinking, if we win this one, we get a chance to celebrate it and maybe give ourselves a proper go in an All-Ireland semi-final. So like, I think Drom have a great chance. And just, you always know when you get back and play an opponent you lost by a point. And look, Scariff deserved to win that game last year, but you always think ifs and buts. There was a late free that Emer McGrath missed that she's usually unerring. You think this is, if there was one opponent Drom wanted, it's Scariff.
Yeah, and they'll be hoping that the goal scoring exploits of Niamh Tracy, Joanne Ryan and Niamh Long can maybe keep going, but they'll have to keep an eye on Abby Walsh and Aoife Power, who were both very good for Sarsfields. Borris Lee's camogie journey came to an end. First outing in the Munster Championship, and came up a little bit short against Ablog, but a great season overall, and back up to senior.
Yeah, no, it was looking at the scoreline, God Almighty, it seemed like a bit of a bloodbath or a mudbath down in Ablog last weekend. So I suppose, look, it would have been great for them maybe to get to a provincial final, but look, they've had a good year. They'll be up senior next year, and I think they'll be, I suppose, with a young profile of that team, they'll be very, very competitive.
Yeah. Anything else you want to touch on before we finish up?
No, I suppose we had Paudie on the front cover. I know we were hoping to get him on. We might try and waffle on for 5 more minutes to see. I know he was under pressure to get down from Thurles or from Dublin to give us a few minutes, so maybe we might waffle on for the moment. But no, I just hope his book launch goes well tomorrow night. Now again in Thurles, like, I suppose a lot of. It's a pity now he's had to produce a book at this stage of his career, but I suppose he probably wants to get it out and about and done and dusted before, I suppose, Tip get back. I think, was it the 24th of November, intercounty of training is officially starting, and I know there's a few of the league fixtures are starting to drift out. We haven't got the Tip ones leaked at the moment. I suppose it just shows you maybe how far Tip are down the food chain at the moment, that it's only the Limerick ones seem to be leaked out, and the Dublin ones and the Kerry ones that I think the only fixture I know of is at Tip will be playing Dublin in Croke Park, I think, in round 3 in late February. I don't know where the other 4 matches against Kilkenny, Waterford, Laois and Antrim are, and in what order schedule. I think we're due to be home to Waterford and Laois and away to Kilkenny and Antrim, but I don't know in what order and what dates they're at the moment.
Yeah, Willie Maher. So Willie Maher in the Battle of Ballingarry bringing Laois to play Tipperary. That'll be an interesting one.
Yeah, or maybe
another thing. No, go ahead.
Yeah, no, we're going on.
So there's also Tipperary interest in the Leinster Club Championship this weekend because Clough-Ballacalla, managed by Declan Lappin, are up against Kilmacud Crokes. Beat them last year. This time they have to go into Parnell Park, which is definitely a tight field. Will definitely feel an awful lot tighter than Portlaoise. Do you think he can take them on a journey again?
It's I don't know. While they were fully deserving winners over Kilmacud last year, it was in Portlaoise. It was a foul night. Maybe Kilmacud had weren't fully focused and maybe didn't give the Clough-Ballacalla the respect they deserve. I think there's revenge on Kilmacud's mind this weekend. It's in Parnell, as you say. Laois Club hurling, and it's been shown over the years, they're always very, very competitive outside the province. I don't know. I think a lot like Drom with Scariff Gunlow, I think there's an element of revenge in the air with Kilmacud Croke. So I think I'd fancy them to win that one.
Yeah, there might be, but and some of these Crokes young lads who were given their bows last year, like Davy Crowe and Dara Purcell, they have come on. They've had another year under their belts. They're back-to-back Dublin champions now. And there's the likes of, I'm not sure, is it Michael or Micheál Roach that's in a corner forwards this year? He looks good. And then you've Fergal Whiteley. But there's an awful lot of young lads on that team even now. There's been a big changeover even since last year with Crokes. And Clough still have probably the most seasoned players in, guys you've mentioned there already, likes of Paudie Maher, Willie Dunphy, Willie Hyland, who I think at 35, he was more or less man of the match in the county final win over Cameras. So I do think they have a lot of quality in their team. And if it's a really wintry day, which it most likely will, I just think that they have slightly more ball winners and they could be able to dog Crokes out of it. Now, it could be proven wrong because Crokes have come through big challenges this year, including Ballyboden in the semi-final and Nafina in the final. So I think that's going to be a close game.
Yeah, I think that the game for me, I'm more interested in this week is Naas against Shinrone. Just one, it must be 4 or 5 weeks since Shinrone won the off league. They've had plenty of time to celebrate. Can they refocus for Leinster? But I think for me is how competitive are Naas going to be at senior club level in how they've come up from intermediate level this year. I think I wouldn't be surprised if Naas won this one. I think it's a home game in Newbridge for Naas, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure they're neutral venues, but it's on
in Newbridge.
Yeah, it's the one for me now. I think this is where we could get an upset with Naas maybe winning. And I know that they would have had a few guys, and now that they're out of the football provincial championship, I know it was only last weekend, but they can really have a go with this. And we know the work that's going on in Naas hurling, and they're competing regularly in leagues down in Kilkenny, so they will hold the Offaly senior champions, would hold them absolutely no fears whatsoever.
Yeah, and they've plenty of Kildare senior players as well. And I know that they're only after coming back up from the Christie Ring, but they've shown plenty of quality in recent years. And James Burke was playing last weekend for Naas against Kilmacud Crokes, which was up in Parnell Park, actually. But Shinrone, how far away are they from Laura?
15, 20 minutes, not very far. So no, we actually played them about 10 days before the county final in a challenge match. And I remember thinking that night, they were so on it. They were so on it. And I said, geez, usually 10 days out from a county final and you're first, you were thinking maybe a couple of players will be holding back, maybe not wanting to get injured. I said coming away, geez, Kilcormac will want to play well to beat these guys. Trevor Fletcher had them hopping, and geez, there was no surprise that they went on. But the thing is now is it's such a weight from the high of maybe if you're playing at that Leinster game 2 or 3 weeks after, you're still on the high. It's 5 weeks now. The emotional high of that has gone. Will they be able to get themselves up again? I think there's maybe one other players has gone to Australia since. So I think something about Kieran Cleary having gone. So will they be able to get themselves up to emotional high so soon? I'm not sure they can.
And actually,
in 5 weeks, I'm not sure they can. Hello.
How did that game go when you played against Kilruane?
Oh, they won comfortably. Like we weren't. Yeah, they won. They won 5 or 6 points, but they were a good bit. They were a lot sharper than we were. I think we were sort of. It was before even we had our county quarterfinals, so we were sort of in that sort of limbo period where we didn't even know who we were playing, which was annoying as well. So.
Should we? And do you want to call it at this stage? I'm not sure if Paudie's going to make it at this point.
Probably doesn't look like it. So we might have a chat with him down in Thurles tomorrow night.
Yeah, okay, absolutely. Well, look, that's it for this week's show. Don't forget to pick up a copy of the Nina Guardian All the Latest with Tipcast in there. Thanks very much, Shane.
Talk to you next week.